I can't stop thinking about Darkwood, an indie game developed by a primary team of 3 people and a dog, none of which had a special taste for horror, no favorite movie or game to base their passion off of, at least not from what I could find online. And yet, they achieved something recognizably known only as cosmic horror. You've got your slashers, demons, robots, and even psychological horror, but cosmic horror hits different. Because out of all those categories, exactly 0 of them give the player any sense of scope in relation to their position within the universe. H.P. Lovecraft was an author from the early 1900s, and is commonly known as the father of said genre. One of his most famous works was a short story known as The Call of Cthulhu, only 3 chapters long. It tells the story of Francis, a man named the executor of his late Uncle George's estate. George himself was an ancient language professor, and while going through his belongings, Francis discovers a series of research notes detailing his uncle's last adventure. Immediately, we can begin to draw parallels between the two. My reason behind making this video was not only to showcase my love for this game, but also to mention that, to the best of my knowledge, the creators had never read Cthulhu or any other Lovecraftian works, which makes Darkwood all the more impressive to me. The following is not only a review, but a comparative analysis. Spoilers will be present for both book and game from this point onward. So if you're truly interested in making this journey on your own, I suggest you exit the video now. Because without further ado, let's talk about Darkwood. Throughout the Call of Cthulhu, we follow George as he learns of a secret hidden cult that predates humanity and all of recorded history. They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones who had lived ages before there were any men, and formed a cult which had never died. Chapter 1 explores the notes found amongst George's belongings and includes a documented series of both physical and mental illnesses suddenly striking and then disappearing, causing those affected by it to have similar dreams and visions of a nightmare city whose name is too difficult for most people to pronounce. It's all extremely paranormal, considering it happens in different places all around the world, all at the same time. But the number of extracts was tremendous. Mental illnesses and outbreaks of group folly or mania around the world. In New York City, hysterical Levantines mob police. In California, a Theosophist colony dresses in white robes while awaiting a glorious fulfillment which never arrives. And so numerous as the recorded troubles in insane asylums. By Chapter 2, we meet a police officer named John LaGrasse, who approaches a group of antiquarians looking to identify an idol made from greenish black stone. With him, he bore the subject of his visit, a grotesque, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statuette whose origin he was at a loss to determine. Geologists, the curator had told me, had found it a monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world had no rock like it. He told them of how he seized the item during a police raid on a supposed voodoo cult, but also told of the year prior where he led a search party in an attempt to rescue several missing women and children. The police found the victims' oddly marred bodies being used in a ritual where 100 men, all of a mentally aberrant type, were braying, bellowing, and writhing. Finally ending in Chapter 3, we learn of a group of innocent sailors who encounter Cthulhu himself while out at sea, coming across an island not noted on any map, the geometry of which is only described as all wrong up until this point. Only seen in dreams and visions from the insane, the sailors described the island as a coastline of mingled mud, ooze, and weedy cyclopean masonry, which can be nothing less than the tangible substance of Earth's supreme terror. For instead of describing any definite structure or buildings, he dwells only on broad impressions of vast angles and stone surfaces, surfaces too great to belong to anything right or proper for this Earth. The story ends in a somewhat underwhelming fashion, where the innocent group of outliers accidentally set Cthulhu free. Most of their party die almost instantly while the 2 remaining sailors escape. Charging straight for him as he dives into the sea, they crash their vessel into the top of his head. He disappears entirely, and the reader is left to wonder whether or not he's truly escaped. One thing for sure is that Cthulhu, just like his cult, can't die. Unlike Francis, who knows his time will soon come to an end. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose. Again in that chasm of stone which has shielded him since the sun was young. The lore of Darkwood places the game setting in Poland, 1975. At the start of everything, a great bright object of unknown origin fell from the sky, and within the coming years came a plague that not only affected the people and animals, but the land as well. Trees and shrubbery not known to modern science began to grow faster than possible. The government did its best to contain the disease by quarantining the inhabitants, burning down homes, and killing the infected livestock. But by 1979, the trees had overcome the roads, homes, and everything else. Eventually, the growth was so thick that no one could pass in or out. 8 years went by, isolated from the world, trapped with an incurable disease. It was pure chaos. Mass insanity, mutations, increased aggressive hysteria, and even supernatural phenomena occurred. Fields had been flooded and entire families starved. All that was left were the few remnants of villagers and whatever little humanity they could muster. Everyone else had either become a savage living in the woods or a mutant transformed by disease. By 1987, the mysterious infection had disappeared. The government dug underground tunnels leading in and out of the woods, but only to keep an eye on things. In fact, anyone who discovered these tunnels were shot on sight. They were for teams of scientists to observe and report only. This is where you come in. But unlike Francis, who experiences everything secondhand through journals and manuscripts, we're the ones enduring the nightmare. We're the ones writing the journal. The main protagonist is a scientist known only as the Stranger, and after being attacked by savages and tied to a tree, he's the only surviving member of his team. Lost and injured, he's found by a local doctor who treats his wounds, but then proceeds to torture him for information. He's unconscious. I've never seen him around here. He's only carrying a key and some journal. Since he managed to sneak in here, he must know how to get out. Of course, he won't help me voluntarily, but that is of no importance. He steals your only way out and leaves you for dead. Your objectives? Find the doctor. Get the key. Escape. The only real piece of advice you're given is to respect the woods and keep the lights on, because they're coming either way. In the beginning, you're tasked with fighting off packs of dogs and the occasional savage, exploring and scavenging by day before returning home to hunker down by night, and just pray something doesn't find you. Each day you discover more as you branch out further and further into the unknown, and that's where the true fear comes into play. As Lovecraft put it so perfectly, the oldest kind of fear is that of the unknown. During gameplay, you can only see what's directly in front of you, essentially hiding 70% or more of the screen. In typical horror fashion, a game's score will always begin playback once an enemy takes notice of you, or you're trapped in a large room until everything but you is dead. Even in Silent Hill, there's always the radio which rings out to alert you you're not alone. In Darkwood, there's none of that. The soundtrack, as terrifying as it is, almost never plays, and you don't want it to, because sound is your enemy. If you can hear something, that means something can hear you. So I'd rather walk around in the dark with my weapon ready than be able to see. Darkwood is slow and heavily atmospheric, as opposed to winding up jump scare after jump scare, a mechanic that was widely popularized at the time of its release. They went against the norm and created a game that doesn't let you know you're about to get spooked. It lets you know that if you don't do it right, you're going to die. The pure terror of coming across a house and not knowing what's inside is this game's greatest strength. As you turn each corner, you can only hope there's just another wild dog and not something else. And speaking of which, can we just talk about how powerful this game's audio design is for a second? Each sound is as visceral and shocking as you can realistically expect. The rain, the thunder, even the dogs. It's almost surreal how good everything sounds, especially when paired with some of the best visual components I've ever seen from a top-down game. The way lighting works when you see an enemy lurking outside your hideout is terrifying. It's not perfect, however. Like every game, there's going to be bugs and glitches, but even then, just when you think you're safe, the lights go out. Darkwood is a testament to survival horror and will no doubt go down as a cult classic among the likes of Silent Hill and Resident Evil, but not for the reasons you think. Stories are what carry a game's legacy. Player experiences and relatability are what make games like this memorable, because anyone who's played it, let alone completed it from beginning to end, has a story about a close call or a moment of surreal fear that captivated them into either finishing the game or uninstalling it. My moment was being trapped in a church basement surrounded by poison traps and red chompers, the strongest enemies of the first chapter, and having every instinct in my body telling me, run. The Call of Cthulhu was released in February of 1928, almost a century before, and without any prior knowledge of the book, Acid Wizard Studios created entirely by accident its twin. Let me drop some parallels for you. The Great Old One, Cthulhu, arrives on Earth and transforms the rock and stone into a great city. He forms a worldwide cult which never dies through telepathic mental manipulation, driving most of those who can't handle their own existentialism insane. Those who can handle the truth begin to create statues and bas relief sculptures of him. Both the sane and insane sacrifice others in worship of Cthulhu, and when we finally see him through the manuscript of the sailors, he's described as a mountain who walks. It was nightmare itself, and to see it was to die, but it made men dream, so they knew enough to keep away. Now take this in comparison to Darkwood. The bright light that fell to the earth in 1975 is only ever referred to as the Being. We don't know where it came from, but we do know that the moment it touched down, it altered the land, growing trees faster than they could be cut down, and driving the trapped residents of the Polish villages insane. Those afflicted by it the most began to slather themselves in mud and attach sticks to their heads, becoming full savages of the woods. We even get to witness it firsthand through the doctor, whose sanity begins to rapidly decline if you choose to spare him. One could argue that doesn't sound cultish until you begin to realize every savage behaves the same. They attack whoever comes near their camps, they tie kidnapped victims and animals to trees. Hell, you can even find deformed crucifixes and shrines made in their own likenesses. There's clearly a form of worship here. By the end of your journey, the stranger escapes the eldritch horrors that plague the woods. He makes it back home, back to his apartment, and back to his bed. And the player is presented with a choice. Go to sleep, or leave. Let the nightmare end, or realize the truth and escape the being's grasp, which will essentially wake the stranger up in the real world, one that's entirely overgrown with roots and dead trees that go on for miles in a sea of decaying earth. You do what any sane person would. Burn it all. Killing yourself in the process, you free everyone from the dream, but only to wake up surrounded by an inescapable inferno. It was either that, or let everyone be consumed from the inside out. Take your pick. The only parallel I couldn't find was evidence of other beings. Cthulhu's cult constantly references him as one of multiple great old ones, while Darkwood doesn't mention beings outside of the main one we encounter. But to that I say, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Thanks for watching, and remember, all roads lead deeper into the woods.